Well, hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Wednesday Night Live. We are still on Facebook and Facebook Live on our Rock Creek Church Facebook page. Thanks all of you for joining us. Just a heads up, we are in transition. We are moving towards a July 15th release date of a brand new subscribable podcast, which will not just be audio, it'll be a video podcast called Go the Distance. So you will be able to subscribe to that channel through Apple, and it will be a podcast, video cast that's released every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Now, it'll either be a vodcast of me teaching, it might be an interview, it might be leadership principles, but you can already see the setting is beginning to change as we are actually in our brand new studio here at the Rock Creek offices that we have been able to put together by the help of some wonderful people that know video, know audio, and know construction. And this is going to be an amazing venue, an amazing format, as we're going to be able to utilize this place to not only teach you guys on Wednesday nights from the Word of God, but also use it for leadership podcast, for church planning coaching, all kinds of avenues to use this room. And so super excited and stoked about what the future is in this venue. COVID-19 was something none of us saw coming. And it was something none of us wanted to have to deal with, but we've dealt with the things we've had to deal with. We've jumped into the pits with lions on snowy days, yes. And all the men in there are watching. They know what we're talking about. Yeah. And we've learned some things. And on the backside coming out of COVID-19, now that we're back in the building on Sunday, we've learned that the Wednesday night venue, the Wednesday night teaching piece has been a huge positive for us. So as you guys know, a few weeks ago on Wednesday night, you guys watched a discussion between my pastor friend, Maxwell Clark, who pastors Spring Church. Life Point Church in Spring, Texas. You watched Maxwell and I have an interview on this issue that's right in our front windshield right now of racial unrest and racial reconciliation, and just a discussion between an African-American pastor and an Anglo pastor who love each other dearly and who see our diversity, who don't deny the diversity, but live in unity within the diversity. And so it was a great conversation. We had great response to that. Now, because I'm a pastor and because I want to see all spectrums of the discussion, I want to be balanced in our approach. I don't necessarily just want to talk from one perspective. I want to talk from all perspectives, and I'm not afraid to do that. People we learned today, again, people who chase after God, in particular men who chase after God, take risk.
That's right.
And I'm not afraid to take a risk. I'm not afraid to put myself out there. I'm not afraid to be real. Sometimes that the result of that is criticism. The result of that is pushback, or even some ugly threats or thoughts towards those who take risks for Jesus, but I think that's what we're called to do. Right. So as you guys can see, I have my friend Jeremy Reyna here with me, and many of you know Jeremy. Jeremy and Nikki and Corey and Cameron, they've been around Rock Creek for many years. They were here before it was Rock Creek, when it was COC, meeting in a school. And Jeremy and Nikki led our student ministry for, how many years did you guys lead this?
I think we were there for 6 years.
Yeah, 6 years involved in students. For instance, my son, Ryder, grew up under Jeremy's ministry, and he graduated from high school 2 years ago. So he grew up with Jeremy being his student pastor, and you did a great job mentoring such a wonderful young man, my son. I had something to do with that, but I think you had a lot to do with that too. But I really know his mama really had the most to do with it. But Jeremy was never full-time on staff at Rock Creek /COC. He was always at a part-time. It was a full-time work for part-time pay, not even part-time pay, a stipend pay. But he gave everything he had, and he went all in, investing in the lives of teenagers. Now, what he did to be the breadwinner of his family during those years is Jeremy was in law enforcement, and he worked for the Louisville Police Department, and he just recently retired. And I know you don't look, when I say that, people are like, he retired. Tell me about how you were able to retire at 38.
Well, God's blessing. So actually 39. I graduated high school, and I've always had a desire to go in law enforcement. That was one of the, my mom would tell stories about me being 5 years old, running around the house saying I want to be a police officer. So literally, I had this goal and vision in mind in my life, and I graduated high school, and I went right across the street and applied and got a job as a jailer. So it started my city pension at that time. So at 19 years old, I started that ability to be able to have a 20-year retirement. Never thought I would actually take utilization of it because I was going to be a lifelong cop, man. That's all I ever wanted to do. And as you know, and I know, God has other plans sometimes. So I was able to retire in September of 2019, and we had moved to Eastern Oklahoma for a little while to do some ministry work out there.
Okay. And now you recently moved back.
And now we're recently moved back.
And we're glad to have you back, brother.
We appreciate it, man. We missed home.
Well, we love the Reynas. I mean, but we love Nikki and the girls, that's for sure. And you're welcome to come too. I'm just kidding. So 20 years. Of those 20 years, it being in law enforcement, how many years were you like on the beat?
So I spent the first 5 years working in the corrections unit, and then the rest of that, the other 15 years I spent on the street.
Okay, and I do believe, if I remember right, you rode a motorcycle.
Yes, sir.
You were in a car.
Yes, sir.
You've done all kinds of things.
Yes, sir. I was blessed with I had a lot of good men around me leading me. That's always been a fortunate thing in my life, is I had men that were guiding me. So very early in my career, I was promoted to what they call FTO. So it's not a paid promotion, but it's the ability to train new rookie officers as they're coming in. So I was a training officer for a couple of years, and my heart's desire is motorcycles. And there was a position that came over to be a motorcycle police officer in our traffic unit, and I took that, and that's where I spent literally the last 14 and a half years or 13 years of my career doing fatality crash investigation and working in the traffic unit.
Yeah, I'm getting just so everybody knows out there, is I'm 50 years old, and I'm getting, I don't think midlife is 50. Midlife's probably more like 35 to 40, but I'm going to say that's midlife for me. I'm getting the bug to ride a motorcycle.
We will take care of that. I'll make sure we take care of that soon.
Yeah. I actually have it on my to-do list this fall to take the driver's safety course, because I've never driven a motorcycle or rode a motorcycle out on the streets. I've ridden on back roads or out in country on dirt, but never in traffic. So I know that's important. You got to get that done.
Yes, absolutely.
And then also I have played around with a pastor friend of mine's 800-pound Harley. That thing's a beast. And many of you now know I rode that in to the church on Father's Day, and that was the beast of my pastor friend John's motorcycle. So I look forward to that day when I own my own. But anyway, let's get off motorcycles, because I might just go totally off on a tangent there and have one purchased by the end of the day. Let's talk a little bit about the current culture and climate. There's a lot of racial unrest, and we know that, and there's a lot of things that have transpired through the actions of police officers, law enforcement officers, that has kind of been like a powder keg that ignited it. And I want you to know, I know this because I'm sitting here with you and I've known you for several years. The actions of one man cannot be equated to the actions of every man.
That's absolutely right.
And that what we saw on the video in Minneapolis with this officer, I don't even want to say his name because I don't want to bring any attention to him, because that was pure evil, and that was hate at its highest level, and what he did was wrong. And the others that were there that didn't literally just go and rip him off of that man and stand up for that man, that man George Floyd, that was wrong too.
Absolutely.
And so but I also know that we have a tendency in our culture to swing a pendulum from one side to the other, and that we don't find the balance, and we throw babies out with bathwater.
That's right.
And a lot of that's driven by social media, television media, and all of that. So I wanted to get a balanced conversation. My conversation with Maxwell was amazing. Probably one of the best conversations I've ever had in my life, that was captured on a video.
Yeah.
Maxwell and I are not just friends. We love each other. And you could feel the love in the room, but you could also feel the tension in the room of struggle, real pain.
Yeah.
And every time he talks to me about some of the cultural things that he has to deal with, I look at him as a grown man, a father, a husband, a pastor. It breaks my heart.
Yep.
But at the same time, when I turn on my TV and I see the hatred, and I see the vileness being thrown at good men that serve us in law enforcement, and women as well, it breaks my heart too.
Absolutely.
Because I know men and women who serve in law enforcement. So tell me about, how do you, because you've been retired, but you've lived in that world where there is chaos and unrest due to situations just like George Floyd that have happened in the past, in particular Ferguson. And so what's it like? You said I always wanted to be a police officer, and I can remember growing up, you'd ask a little boy, what do you want to be?
Yeah.
He'd say, most of them would say, I want to be a fireman, a police officer, or the United States of America.
Yeah.
I think right now fireman would be about the only three that a little boy would want to be.
That's right.
Because of the current state of culture. Talk to me a bit about what is it like to be a police officer in this culture?
I had the ability to retire in September, as we already discussed. But through that 15 and even the time that I was in the jail, the 20 years of being in the law enforcement community, we've seen a wide pendulum. I mean, I remember there's times where we'd be on the streets and it would be after an incident and people hated us, didn't want to talk to us, didn't want to see us, and then you have the post 9/11 things happen, and then everywhere you walked as a police officer, you can keep people back from wanting to give you a gift card, thank you, hug you, hey, we appreciate you, we love you. So it's been a crazy 20 years of literally it's just gone back and forth, and it doesn't seem to ever settle in the middle. They're always extremes. It's either we love you as a police officer or we hate you as a police officer. And, a lot of it has to do with culture. A lot of has to do with the way we were raised. I mean, I remember, telling my mom and dad that I wanted to be a police officer as a child. My dad hated the idea. My dad was an old school Hispanic man that worked his days and drank his nights. God rest his soul. He was saved before he passed and repented of those things, and we are so grateful for that. You were at his funeral, and I've shared this with you. But I remember sharing with him that I wanted to do this, and he fought the idea because I was the man. I was the sellout. I was going to go against everything that he wanted to do on the weekends, right? And that created some rift in my life because now I want to please my dad because he's dad, but I also know God instilled a dream in my heart for a reason. I was able to do some things in my career, which I'm very proud of, and work with some great men and women. Look, my spiritual dad still works the streets in Louisville. The reason I was able to take a position as your youth pastor was because a man stepped out of his comfort zone, was saved at the Village Church in Highland Village, shared the gospel with me over Chipotle one day, and that ultimately led us to be able to do what we do. So without that career, I wouldn't have this. I wouldn't have had the opportunity to do the things that I've done. But it is strange. I mean, I remember being in uniform multiple times, and we would be at lunch somewhere, and you would literally get up to walk out, and you would hear a parent say, if you don't start acting better, I'm going to tell the policeman to take you. And Nikki would hate it because I would make a show of it at that point to sit and talk to the child and say, look, buddy, or little girl, we're not going to do that. We're here to help you. And then immediately I'd go into conversation with the parent and say, look, do you really want them to be afraid of us? Mm-hmm. Like they get out of the house at night, they run away, they have nowhere else to go. The lifeline to get them back home is me, and you've instilled fear in them from the beginning. So I did a lot in my time to try to combat that. I didn't always fit in with the police culture. I'll be honest with you. I was always more, let's go talk to people. Let's get out of the car. And that's why I love riding motorcycles. That's why I love that part for this, short time I did. Open air, man. You can pull up. You can talk to people. Kids attracted, black, white, Hispanic. It doesn't matter. They see a motorcycle and they want to talk to the motorcycle cop. Mm-hmm. So we had a lot of opportunity to do that in the division that I was in. I also, one of the things that we did as a part of our division was car seat installation. And a part of that car seat installation, man, it doesn't matter, again, if you're black, white, Hispanic, Asian, what do you want to do when you have a child? You want to protect that child. So we provide this service where we're able to talk to the people, get in front of the people, share with them that I'm a dad just like you are. Mm-hmm. And this is why me and this group of men and women are so passionate about protecting your child. Yeah. It has been a crazy 20 years, and to police in it, it's tough. It has been tough, and I can't speak for the last 9 months because it has literally gone almost explosive over the last 9 months. I've never seen our country in such a level of hate and discontent in this last 9 months. And I've seen brothers and sisters that have told me, man, you got out at the right time. I didn't intend to get out. Mm-hmm. It was not my decision to get out. I truly, God called us. We were scheduled to retire anyways, right? Right. But I know God had a plan, and here we are. And now I think we need to bring voice to both sides. Yeah.
So we've talked a little bit, offline, leading into today, and I think probably the issue that I think with anything in life, whether it's a police officer, whether it's a firefighter, whether it's a pastor, nothing is ever shown when you just do your job. Nobody celebrates when you just do your job.
Yes, sir.
And you do it with love, respect, and honor for all people. You just show up.
Yep.
You know, that's a big thing in today's world. Just show up.
Yes, sir.
If you're a father, show up.
Amen.
If you're a mom, show up. It's not someone else's job to raise your child.
That's right.
It's your job. I mean, if you can have them, you need to be able to raise them. And so you need to take that responsibility. Show up.
Yep.
And I think what we see in our culture is no one celebrates showing up. What everybody what everybody exacerbates
Yes.
is when you don't show up and you show out.
Yeah.
And we see that visually in front of us through social media, through the television. So never did I ever see on our news channels a report of you putting I know there may have been some stuff, but I never saw anything about you putting a car seat and showing somebody how to put a car seat in their car or how to utilize it properly to protect a child. That never got shown.
Yeah.
But what got shown was when you misbehaved or you did it wrong. And so I think there's a little bit of that. There's a little bit of a bad news. Don't ever let a crisis be wasted.
Yeah.
Let's capitalize on anything that's bad. Again, I'm not saying what happened in Minnesota wasn't bad. It was the worst of the
Absolutely.
worst. But I think sometimes, just like, this mom you're talking about, if you don't behave, I'm going to turn you. My parents said that to me. That was a threat. I'm going to get the cops. I'm going to call the cops on you, And so you're raised with this mentality to be afraid.
That's right.
And I think you were raised that way. Is that not right? You were raised to be afraid of police and that they're all bad or they're all going to hurt you or take you away. And so, and I also know this. Can we just be honest? And you don't have to say any names. But there are just some men, when you put a uniform on them, a gun on their hip and a badge on their chest, that like a Rambo mode goes in, not Robo, but Rambo. Well, it could be RoboCop, but Rambo mode goes in, and all of a sudden now they think they're above everybody else, and they're badder than bad, and the result of that is bullying.
Absolutely.
And so you've probably worked with some cops like that, and what do you think? What can we change to maybe help some of these men and women who that happens? Maxwell said we need to look further back into their past. We need to go back and look at like what's on their social media.
Yeah.
We need to see some things from their high school years. And there needs to be a little bit deeper research maybe done in some of these men and women. So talk to me a little bit.
Well, and it's funny to say that. I was blessed with a great career. City of Louisville has some of the most stringent policies to overcome in order to get hired. So I agree with Maxwell. We need to, and I love Maxwell. Let me tell you, I've met him. I've worshiped with him. Great man. And he's right. We do need to look into the background of the officers. Now, I can only speak on behalf of the city of Louisville. Is they are the hardest department to get hired on with. And that's why I feel coming out of that city, you don't see things like this happening because we do research the social media. We have a full crew of investigators that's their job. I remember getting hired on and literally seeing ex-girlfriends being interviewed that I never told them about. They did their job. They interviewed and they found out. They wanted to find out if I was abusive. They wanted to find out how my temper was. They wanted to do the things that they needed to do. So absolutely. I don't know what other agencies are doing. If they are not doing their due diligence and hiring the right police officer with the right mentality, yes. Now with anything, and you and I have seen this, we talked about they don't display the good all the time. We've seen our local pastors that are doing amazing things during COVID right now. Nobody in the news is displaying that. Nobody in the news is showing that. But let one of those pastors slip up and do something wrong, and it's all over the news. So where in the law enforcement world, man, we have men and women that have dedicated their lives to lay it on the line, not because the community they work in is Black, Hispanic, Asian. They don't care. It's because they love their community and they have a call for service. So I don't disagree with them at all. That needs to be done. It's just, how do you find the wolf that's in sheep's clothing. How do you find the wolf? And that's where, I was blessed to be a training officer. We were looking for things. How are they responding to certain people? Are we seeing a pattern of, activity? I'll be honest with you. I was actually very early in my career, I was assigned to a district in Louisville that was predominantly Hispanic. So at one point I made somebody very angry, and they came up to the police department and complained, and there was actually a deal filed against me for racial profiling. And they went in and they started questioning me about why I was pulling over. The majority of my stops and majority of my contacts were Hispanic people. I'm Hispanic. I speak Spanish. So where do you think they placed me at? In the majority Latin community. It's not that I was racially profiling, but when I'm in the middle of a community that's 90% Hispanic and 90% of my contacts are there, and I look at that and I think about the things that are being displayed, they say, oh, this officer's been investigated for this. Well, let's look deeper into that history too. Mm-hmm. I was investigated for that. Yeah. And, I did nothing wrong. I explained, you put me in this, and great. I was very grateful for this. It was actually the neighborhood I grew up in. I grew up in this predominantly Latin neighborhood.
So I want to ask maybe just a couple more questions. We have just a few more minutes left. I want to take the discussion maybe just a little bit deeper. Mm-hmm. So what happens? What happens in our cities of our nation if we abolish the police?
Brad, I can't answer that question. That the mere thought of it instills fear in me. To be honest, Nikki and I've already had a conversation about, the what if. Like, what if we continue seeing this route? What's our plan? What's our backup plan? I hate to say it like this to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but what's our bug out plan? Like, literally, because I've got to do what I've got to do to protect my wife and my kids. We see it happening right now in Seattle, where literally 6 city blocks are without police, without government, and anarchy is happening inside of it. And, there are people for it, there are people against it. I would not allow my family to stay in that situation. I just, in good conscience, could not see myself living in that. Brad, by and large, the police officers that are running our streets are men and women that are willing to lay down their lives for you and me, although they never met us. And it breaks my heart because, for instance, when Louisville they had a rally a couple weeks ago, and, I'd been talking to Craig all day, and I love Craig to pieces. I'll do anything for my buddy because he saved my life. He saved what would be my marriage now. I prayed without ceasing until I found out he was home that night because I was terrified for those guys. Yeah. And that was truly the first time since I've been retired that I've felt guilty about not being in uniform.
So I have a top 10 list of things maybe every day I need to accomplish, or maybe 5 things. I'm a to-do list guy. Yes, I always have that written down somewhere, beginning of the week, try to accomplish it by the end of the week. And every day has a list. As a police officer, what's on the to-do list every day?
I'll tell you, the number one thing is to go home to my family. Yeah. The number one thing is to get home to my family, because there is evil out there. There is evil that intends harm to people, and our police officers, our military members, they are here to defend. Are there bad people in those positions? Unfortunately, yes, just like there's bad pastors and there's bad doctors and there's bad whatever. But my number thing on my to-do list was to get home to my family. Yeah. God gave me an ability to do a job and do it well. And every day I would leave home and kiss my wife. And, I was very blessed. She was raised by a police officer. Her grandfather was a police officer. And she knew there were, if she called me at 3:00 in the afternoon or 9:00 at night and I didn't answer, that wasn't the time to worry. Yeah. There were times that you had to worry, but those weren't the times. But my number one to-do list was to get home.
Yeah, that's not on my, I never write that on my to-do list every week, make sure I get home every day. That's just not there. Probably make sure I go home, but not get home. There's a difference. So in the community, you talked about how you ran the beat in the community you grew up in. And if you were to go back into that community, into that area that you grew up in Louisville, and ask them, do they want the police to be abolished? What would they say?
I think you're going to flip a coin and you're going to get many different answers. I will tell you, I've seen in the Metroplex here in this area, I've seen our communities like Louisville, Flower Mound, Corinth. I see a mass supporting of our police officers because they're good police officers. They're good men and women. They're husbands and sons and church members and pastors that are coming out of these police departments. They are good people, and I don't think everybody is on this. I don't think everybody's on the same stage as what the media is and trying to instill a fear into us. Because you and I both know, and I hate to say this, but you and I both know that fear comes driven by what's in front of you. If we would put the Bible in front of us, we could set less fear. But right now, all media is showing, media and social media is showing to fear what may come. Do things like the officer need to be dealt with? Absolutely. He needs to be put in jail.
What do you think should happen to him?
I think they are doing exactly what they need to do by bringing charges. Now, I will say the flip side of that is we also need to allow our justice system, where it's not perfect, we need to allow that justice system to work. So, immediately we're screaming for him to be arrested. And yes, I agree with that. But there has to be a process that takes place. We have to get there. And I do not disagree with the anger around it. I was just as angry when I saw it. I was actually sick to my stomach because what the world sees in that is they don't see this police officer in this badge. They see all police officers in all badges, and that's heartbreaking. That is absolutely heartbreaking because if I were still on the street, unfortunately, I'd be bearing some of that. My buddy that's working in Louisville right now, he's bearing some of that. And, I wish there was a way that we could come together and just have this big conversation about who the cops really are.
Well, I said this to Maxwell. Trust is the currency of leadership.
Absolutely.
And what that event and that police officer did to George Floyd, what it did is it hurt the credibility and the trust that the community has in all police officers. And so that has to be earned back and has to be gained back. And that's why I'm all for protesting is great. It is. I support protesting. I think we have the right to do that, and we should do that, and we should support that. And as Maxwell and I talked, there is a line that has been crossed when it becomes looting, when it becomes harmful to people's property and harmful to other people. That's the difference between protesting and rioting. There is a difference, and so. I totally, fully support the voice of America saying we want justice and we want this handled properly.
Yes.
But I also say you've got to give it a chance to work. You've got to let it work. Now, if it doesn't work, Jesus, come back.
Please.
If our justice system drops the ball on this and doesn't do the right thing, then I'm praying for the return of Christ. I'm praying for him to come back anyway. But I'm trusting that it will. I'm believing that it will. I'm believing that this is a turning point in our nation, that we've got to get this right. We've got to get this right. So you want to go home every night. That's at the top of the list. I get asked this question a lot. Why don't policemen just shoot people like when they're running from them? Why don't they shoot them in the butt? Why don't they shoot them in the leg? Why do they shoot them in areas that in a lot of cases are fatal and take their lives? That's easy for me to say when I don't carry a gun on my hip every day. I'll shoot somebody in the leg. Yeah. Why is that the case?
Well, that's one of those things, Brad, that, we're trained to shoot center mass. And there are videos and studies, and I just recently watched one, and I wish I could tell you where it was from, where a man was shot multiple times. He was attacking an officer with a knife, and he never stopped the threat. That threat never ended until he was discharged upon, probably 20, 30 times. So a single shot to the leg, somebody's running at you with a knife, we have to stop the threat. I want to go home at night. What if it's somebody attacking you? I've got to make sure that threat is neutralized so not to cause any more harm to you or myself. Try shooting a leg while running in a high-stress situation. But you're trained. You're trained to shoot at the center mass. Yes.
So it's not like a rogue cop is going off the training here and shooting a fatal shot. All cops are trained to shoot at the center of the body.
I tell you from what the city of Louisville has taught us, right, and what my partners and buddies and other agencies, we are taught to shoot at center mass.
Okay. All right. So that answers that question, because I know people have that question, and I've even thought that they're running, shoot them in the butt.
Yeah.
But it's a little bit. Well, you might be able to hit mine, but but that's not necessarily the easiest target to someone who is a threat. Okay, and I think people need to understand that to someone who is a threat. Okay,
That's right.
Not a non-threat.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be shot if you're a non-threat. Let's be honest.
That's right.
Okay, let's get to the heart of the matter, the heart of the chaos, the heart of lawlessness, the heart of a rebellious culture right now. Maxwell said it was people throwing a temper tantrum. That's how he described what we're seeing in the rioting and with the situations in Seattle. And it's a temper tantrum, that people are angry, but they don't know how to have a conversation, express the anger without just going to these extremes.
Yeah.
I think we're living, I'm going to get emails on this. I think we're living in a culture that is now seeing the results of awarding every child a trophy for just showing up. That we raised a generation of kids where we never told them, just because the scoreboard, your team lost by 2 points, it doesn't mean you're a loser, but it means you need to work harder to get better at your craft, get better at your skill. That's just one example.
Yeah.
But what happens is when you raise a generation and a culture where they never have to deal with loss, with devastation, with discouragement, with not getting their way, with the world not catering around them and to them. When you raise a generation where anytime a teacher says anything, the parents are right up there at the school, just in the teachers' faces, that dumbs down authority in the eyes of a kid. And the end result of that is when these kids become adults, there's a lack of respect for authority. We're seeing that lived out in front of us. Now, I'm a baby buster. My parents are baby boomers. My grandparents are the World War II generation. The staff around here calls me the greatest generation ever because I'm 50. I'm not the greatest generation ever. That was my grandparents' generation. But I was raised to take a responsibility, to be accountable, to love your neighbor as yourself. Wasn't raised by perfect parents, but I was raised by parents who tried to instill in me a work ethic, that you have to earn your own way. You get what you put in the effort to get. And we were just middle-class people, lower middle class when I was growing up. We didn't have a whole lot. God has blessed my parents, both sets of my parents, with good businesses, and they've done well in their life. But when I was growing up, it was, we were tight. Everything was tight. And I didn't have anything given to me on a silver platter. I had to go earn it. I started working for my dad when I was 14. Running air conditioning duct in attics. I worked every summer for him. I wasn't the kid that was at the pool every summer. I wasn't the kid who played video games all day and hired somebody to mow the yard. I mowed the yard. And we had a big yard, and my dad did not buy me a ride lawnmower. I had to push it. But all those things taught me to take responsibility. And I dealt with defeat. We lost a lot of games growing up, but we learned to get better. And there was always those one or two teams. I remember South Lake Carroll always kicked our tails in ball, and we wanted to work so hard to beat them. But they didn't give us a trophy to say, well, you gave it your best. Our coaches pushed us and challenged us to get better. We're seeing that. It's a little bit. That's what a little bit has that mentality has created. Not in all of our kids. I'm just saying in some of them, it's created a lack of ability to have a conversation because they didn't get their way. And so they're lashing out in a wrong manner rather than in a civilized manner and to have a conversation. But the other thing, and this is where I want you to go because I think you see this a lot when you were working. We've talked about it. There is a real effect in culture, in all races, across the board, in every city, in every suburban town, in every rural town. There's a real effect from fatherless homes.
That's right.
Tell me about how that affects the generation that's being raised up.
Well, Brad, we could truly end the conversation at that question. Because I think it's you want to talk about a pandemic that we're dealing with, and it's fatherlessness. And I say that too. Again, I was raised where there was a father in my home, and I love my dad. I didn't respect my dad a lot of times growing up because he was a drunk. He was. So to say I was raised in a fatherless home, I had a mom that was there for me, and man, she fought for us. And you know, I've said this many a times. What my dad, and y'all posted a Facebook thing the other day about what did your dad teach you? And really what I wanted to post on there, but I felt bad about it, and I'm going to say it on this podcast, is he showed me the kind of dad I didn't never want to be, that I never wanted to be. I never want my girls to wake up in the middle of the night and go, where's dad at? You know, Cameron, she's 18 months old. She's learned how to open her door, and she's running through the house at 3 o'clock in the morning. I got up and I found her. I could not imagine being a father that didn't have the opportunity to pick her up, take her back to bed, kiss her goodnight, and go back. Fatherlessness is a pandemic that is literally killing our communities because young men and young women no longer understand what home looks like. You know, Paul Barron, he's my police captain. I hope he watches this. You know, one of the things that I credit him with, his daughter told him this one day, and we were talking at lunch one day, and he said, his daughter said, Dad, you have ruined me for relationships. I don't think I will ever find a man that loves me the way you love our mom. And when he said that, I'm getting chills thinking about it. When he said that, I said, that's the kind of husband I want to be. That's the kind of dad. Like, I want my girls to go, no man can love me like dad loves mom. So aim really high. Aim really high, because then you're going to hit a good mark, right? But in place of that, where we probably can't change the generation, man, we can change next door. We can change next door as a student ministry. We can change next door as just a husband and a father. I can change next door. There's a man named Dave Berkey. He drove buses for one of the Baptist churches in Louisville, Texas. And over the summertime, we were a very low income family. He would make it a point to stop at my house, knock on my door, and ask for permission to put me on the bus to take me to this church. Now, I didn't know then that seeds were being planted. I had no clue. But Dave Berkey, being a man, a husband, and a father, and a faithful leader in his community, saw me for whatever reason, and he said, I'm going to lead him however I can to get him on this bus so that he can be surrounded by the gospel. He may not listen for another 20 years. And I owe a lot to men like Dave Berkey. I owe it to men that probably saw on the outside what was happening in my family, and where they couldn't probably convince my dad, they could step in and be the man. And man, we have that opportunity.
Yeah.
You know, I don't need anybody's permission to be a good father.
Yeah. Well, it's not only being a good father to Cameron and Corey, and a good husband for Nikki and to Nikki. It's every man in the church's responsibility to look beyond just the ones that live under their roof and see the ones who are living in homes without a father.
Yes.
And to invest in them. Shame on us for not finding young men and pouring into them, and being the church to them, not just going to church with them.
Yes.
And that's why I know you gave years to student ministry, because you cared about young men, you cared about young women, you cared about raising them up and being. But again, you can't do it all. The church cannot raise your children. You have to raise them yourself, but we come alongside them.
That's right.
And that's where the church has got to engage. The church is ejected out of culture in a lot of ways, and we got to engage back into it. We got to get back into the world and not withdraw from the world. Right. I'm going to talk about this, more and more as these days progress. And I even talked about it 2 weeks ago in my week 4 of Jonah, is that there is a difference between God's moral will and God's missional will. And the church has done such a great job being moral, but we're not on mission. And being on mission means reaching out to the fatherless, mentoring, raising up young men and women to be respectful citizens, that there is a authoritative order to the world. God is authority, ultimate authority. And then there's the parental authority, there's the church's authority. And man, it just seems like there's a rebellion against all authority. Don't put any authority over me. And when you do that, when you live that way, there's chaos, there's ruin,
Absolutely.
there's devastation. And so the fatherless issue is such a powerful issue in our nation. And so I want to thank you for your time. I know we talked about a lot of things, but I just wanted people to. I want a well balanced conversation. I think again, if you swing the pendulum here and then you don't come back over here, you don't come back to the balance. And I think if Maxwell was in the room, he would feel the same way towards you that you feel towards him. We know you guys do, and I know if you stopped him and pulled him over, you would handle him properly with love and respect and honor and value him. And I know that you would de-escalate the situation.
His tension,
But there is some real realities in the world right now. And the reality is that everything is really escalated right now, and probably in a lot of ways will never, ever not be escalated. But let's not judge individuals by the act of another individual, and let's get to know the heart of the man or the woman before we put any kind of label on them.
Absolutely.
Or put any kind of this is what Max prejudiced on them based on a judgment you're making before you ever get to know them. And so the same is true for police officers.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you're Hispanic, and you also speak Spanish.
Yes, sir.
And so I want to do something really different to end today. Would you pray for us? And would you pray for our nation? Would you pray for all races, and in particular our African American brothers and sisters in this time? And would you do that in Spanish?
Oh man, you put me on the spot. I'll do the best I can because my Spanish ain't the greatest, but I'll do it as well as I can.
I won't know a word you're saying except for Dios and Amen. And so
I got you.
But I just think it'd be neat to end with praying in Spanish.
Señor, yo te pido en este día, yo te doy gracias a todos, todo este mundo, que abra los ojos de este mundo, que estamos buscando usted, que estamos buscando su vida, so que podemos vivir como usted, como Biblia así dice, que si vamos a luchar esta vida, que luchamos en el nombre de usted, de Jesucristo. Yo pido por paz, por los policías, por todos que están peleando en la calle ahorita. Yo te voy a pedir paz. Señor, te amamos mucho. So yo te pido en su nombre que das calma a todo este mundo. Y yo te pido todo esto en su nombre. Amén.
Amen. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank
Love
you,
you, my brother. Glad to have you back.
Good to be back.
All right. God bless you guys. Have a great rest of your week. We'll see you Sunday.